So we have in the UK, Hamid, and thank you so much for waiting and your patience and putting you back on hold. How are you, sir?
Hi, yeah, good, thank you. Hi, Matt. Hi, Mandisa.
Hello.
It's really good to be on the show. Yeah.
It says here that you've deconverted and then converted back to Islam, and you feel that you have information that will help us see the truth. So I appreciate that. Help us out.
I'm not sure if I put it that way, but basically I wanted to give you guys my experience and the journey I went through, and then maybe you can decide for yourself. Make up your own mind and see what that was.
I'd like to make an agreement real quick when we start this, Hamid, because there are a lot of other people waiting on hold. I don't really want a whole life story, so I'm probably going to interrupt it at some point to ask questions for clarification about the points that we do find interesting. But yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, just quickly. So basically, around when I was born in a Muslim family, but well, yeah. I didn't really. I was just with my mom and with my sister, so my dad wasn't there, and I was the only man in the house in my own culture. So it's not really. So I had to basically grow on my own sort of thing, and I wasn't particularly religious. Around 14, maybe I started praying for a year or something, and then fasting. But then when I came to Germany from the Islamic countries I was living, I basically, after a couple of years, I stopped completely anything religious. And when I came to UK after like a few years, I basically was watching your show, Atheist Experience, following Richard Dawkins and all the atheists. And basically, I was very logical and tried to find, try to make sense through logic, everything. So that eventually ended up me completely calling myself an atheist and becoming an atheist. And then after a few more years, around when I was 27 or something, I got more into, I was literally reading books every day, but then I started getting into philosophy. From scientific books, I started reading philosophy and looking into Hinduism, Buddhism, and all these sort of philosophical concepts. And then at some point with my friends, as I was doing that, I was very argumentative as well. I argumented with everybody. I watched your shows and everything. And then eventually what happened to me, that when I was going back to, I wasn't even looking at Quran, to be honest, because I couldn't understand it at all. So, and then I was looking at Bible most of the times. And then I was looking at it, and then it started to make sense. Like out of nowhere, like I was reading some sentences, and then the ideas that came from Hinduism and Buddhism and stuff like that, philosophy, and then it just all of a sudden the sentences made sense. I could know what that meant, for example. And then
this is where I want to jump in, because you talked about how you used to use logic. Have you stopped using logic? Did you stop valuing logic?
No. The logic is my only thing. Like, I cannot live.
I just want to make sure, because so when you say something in past tense, like I used to be logical, and then I started looking at philosophy, Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. But you also said that you weren't looking at the Quran, mostly the Bible, but it just all of a sudden started making sense. How can something start to make sense if you're not looking at it? But I think that if something truly makes sense, like if at some point I didn't understand calculus at all. Like it was just didn't make any sense at all. And at some point, somebody taught me just enough. I'm not well versed in calculus. Let me make that clear. But somebody managed to explain it to me in a way where I could understand and perhaps describe to someone else what calculus was for, what sort of calculations we were doing, that it was all about rate of change. And so if you say that you're starting to look at the Quran and it now makes sense, I would think that you would be able to explain to someone.
Actually, Matt, I'm sorry. I'm going to check. Hamid said that he actually started reading the Bible and it made sense. So did you even read the Quran at all?
No, at that time I wasn't reading the Quran. I was only reading the Bible. Well, yeah, the Bible started making
Right.
sense. Loads of things.
So you eventually began to read the
Then I
Quran
So
as well, or
I
in
guess
addition?
all I'm
Yeah.
looking for is an
eventually,
example
yeah,
of something that what I'm looking for, Hamid, and this can be really straightforward. Give me an example of something that didn't used to make sense that now makes sense to you now, because you should be able to explain that fairly clearly.
So I think, yeah, the most important thing I think it was that eventually the concept of God, who God is, what God is, or that it's out there as something that is, it's that every scripture or every book, religious book, is trying to explain, and these philosophies also trying to explain. Even poets are trying to explain, or say it in the poetry.
Okay.
Is eventually that started making sense.
I mean, I got to stop there, because so I asked you to give an example of something that didn't used to make sense, but now makes sense. And you said the concept of God. And so your explanation of what God is something out there, something every scripture and every book is trying to explain. I already understand God at that conceptual level, that religions continue to try to describe something that's out there. So I don't understand why that wouldn't have made sense, that gods are men's attempts at explaining the unknown. What is it that made sense to the standpoint? Okay, go ahead.
No, it's not that I was sort of like looking what the unknown is. I was basically the unknown is the unknown, right? Until it becomes known. So that's what it's when the unknown became known. That's when I understood it. Does that make sense?
I'm asking you, Hamid, for an example. So if I tell you I didn't used to understand calculus, but now I understand it, and here's what I understand it to be, can you do that?
I don't, Matt. I think what it is you are trying to ask me to prove you God.
No, sir. Please listen to what I'm actually asking you and stop making assumptions about what you think I'm doing. All I'm saying is, you said that this stuff in the Bible didn't used to make sense, and now it makes sense. And I'm saying, if it makes sense, you should be able to explain to me what you now understand to be the case and what you didn't understand to be the case before. That's it. I'm not asking you to prove God. I don't think you can. I'm not asking you to present evidence. That's the next step. I'm trying to get you to describe, not because, so let me back up for half a second here. You went from not believing something to believing something. I'm going to ask you in a little bit what actual evidence you have for that belief, for the proposition that belief is true. That is a completely secondary discussion. All I'm interested right now is, you said stuff in the Bible didn't make sense, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it starts making sense, and I want an example of that. Why is that so difficult? Please stop reading into it and either give me an example or say you can't.
No, I can't, because that's
okay.
I can't give you an example.
Then I don't know how to have a conversation with you, because if I tell you there used to be things that didn't make sense to me and now they make sense, and you said, like what? I can give you an example.
Okay, so I don't think that you understand what I'm saying. I think
I know that's what you think.
I completely understand what you're saying.
I'm asking you, okay, Hamid, let me make this as simple as possible. Are there things in the Bible that you did not used to understand, but you understand now?
It was God itself. It did
why will you not answer the question that I'm asking you? I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. Please listen. Are there things in the Bible, sentences, that did not make sense to you previously and do make sense to you now?
Okay, for example, okay, I think I get you. So you're saying, for example...
that is a yes or no question, Hamid. I'm going to ask it again, and if you don't say yes or no, we're done.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you are saying there are things in the Bible that didn't used to make sense to you, but that do make sense to you now. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Right?
I remember
Right?
it was in Bible because I didn't finish my story. I said, and then at the end I went to.
Hamid, I don't know what to do. I can't get you to answer the question and listen to me. So don't interrupt. For clarity, I know this is a repetition because I think you said yes, but for clarity, you are saying there are sentences in the Bible that did not used to make sense to you, but do make sense to you now, yes or no?
Can I a little bit more detail? Am I allowed to give a little bit more detail about to get to the end of my story?
Well, apparently you're not going to answer the question
I don't
first.
know why
So
you won't answer the question that you literally just answered 30 seconds ago when all I'm doing is getting clarity.
Okay, let me.
And literally, if I rewound this, the words that came out of your mouth was that I wasn't even reading the Quran. I wrote this down. These are my notes. I wasn't even looking at the Quran much at that time, mostly the Bible. And there were sentences in there that started to make sense out of nowhere. That's what I wrote down. And so I'm asking you, are there sentences in the Bible that did not previously make sense to you that make sense now? Yes or no?
Yes, I think in the Bible
It's
that God is everywhere, the same as in the
Jesus Christ. The
But
follow-up question is, can you give me an example of one of those sentences?
okay, God is everywhere, and I'm just hoping that this exists in Bible because I don't remember.
wait, what? Wait a minute.
So he's saying the sentence, God is everywhere. He hopes it's in the Bible because he wants to use that as an example of something he didn't used to understand, but currently understands. Correct?
Story because
Hamid, if you would stop talking over me, I'm doing you the best fucking favor anyone's ever going to do for you.
okay.
So the sentence "God is everywhere" is that in the Bible or isn't it? You just said you hope it's in the Bible.
I'm not a Christian. I'm a Muslim. I can say that it's definitely in the Quran.
Hamid, stop talking and listen to me. I do not think you're a Christian. Whether you're a Christian or Muslim is irrelevant. You called in to say that there were sentences in the Bible that did not previously make sense to you, which makes sense to you now. I do not care what your religion is. I do not care if you believe in a God. I do not care if you like green eggs and fucking ham. You said there were things in the Bible that didn't make sense to you, but do now. And you're saying that the sentence "God is everywhere" is one of those. Correct?
Yeah, you are correct.
Don't run when nobody's chasing you. I'm doing my best to set you up to be able to give the clearest example of this that you can possibly give. And you're looking for traps or trick questions. You're looking for assumptions and all kinds of stuff. I have been incredibly straightforward. Now, whether or not the sentence "God is everywhere" exists in the Bible, I would agree that the concept that God is everywhere or God is omnipresent exists in the Bible. And so you're saying at some point, whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So if you are aware of that, I was saying that because my memory is not helping me, so that's why. I'm saying, okay, if that's the thing, that's the same concept that exists in Islam, because from Christianity, when I was reading the Bible, I moved on to Quran, right? Because I wanted to get deeper into this, like what makes more and more and more sense, because I wanted to understand the absolute truth eventually, get to the bottom of it.
How do you know the absolute truth is in the Bible or the Quran?
Because I followed my logic, I followed my understanding, I followed these and through these things.
I'm sorry, your phone broke up. I have no idea what any of that said. How do you know that the absolute truth is in the Bible or the Quran?
That's following as these things came back to me every time a light was going on in my head, getting more I don't know, epiphany or whatever. Then eventually it's the idea or the concept or the reality of God completely became clear to me, and I understood clearly what.
Hamid, whether or not a God concept is clear to you is independent from whether or not that God concept points to anything true. Correct? I thought you said you liked logic.
Right. And what was it?
I thought,
What exactly was it in the Quran that started to make sense to you?
okay, that the Allah is the absolute
Oh
one.
gosh, we cannot hear.
Yeah,
We
whatever your phone is essentially audio pixelating right now.
Sorry, I'm using Viber. I don't know. I'm trying my best. Yeah.
I know.
Is it?
So Mandisa was asking you, what was it about the Quran that made sense? So within the Bible or the Quran, the concept that God is everywhere somehow began to make sense to you. But whether or not something makes sense to you is completely independent from whether or not it's true, correct?
But here's my argument for that. If my senses are like basically for logic, right? Logic only works if
You don't have senses for logic, which is why you're refusing to answer basic questions that expose that. You are overestimating your propensity to use logical reasoning, because all I asked was the fact that something makes sense to you is independent from whether or not it's true, correct?
Matt, I don't think you understand what logic is.
Hamid, I think you're about to be publicly embarrassed repeatedly by suggesting that I don't know what logic is when I'm asking you a very straightforward question that anybody who knows and understands anything about logic would be able to answer instantly, because whether or not a concept makes sense to me is independent from whether or not the concept points to something that is true. I can have a concept of a unicorn that makes sense to me, but that does not mean that the unicorn exists. I can have multiple God concepts in my head that make sense to me, but that doesn't mean that any of them exist. My conception of something is independent from its actuality. This is an undeniable, basic, simple thing.
Yeah, I was going to explain that, but I think I got interrupted about what sense is, what the logic is, and how when you sense something through correct information, eventually it has to make logical sense. Otherwise, it will not. It will be illogical to your senses.
I'm sorry, Hamid, but you don't seem to understand what logic is. Your senses aren't particularly relevant to this. Your senses may not be pointing you to truth, and logic may not be pointing you to truth. Reasoning is about whether or not a particular thought, a particular argument is consistent with reasoning. Identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, the structure of that's logic. If there is no guarantee that because something you think you sense something, that therefore it must exist. That is a logical fallacy.
Okay, then I think that's where our conversation ends then.
Okay. Did you have any evidence for Islam?
I was basically gonna argue about it, like that's the way we are doing right now. But I think if you're gonna do this, then it's gonna take a bit more time. I don't know if you still want to go on about it, but
I don't know. It's up to Mandisa.
No, the short answer seems to be no. So, I mean, if we have other callers that can actually demonstrate good evidence that their God exists, then let's go for it.
Yeah, because these are simple, straightforward questions I'm asking. Like, does the fact that you have a concept of something mean that it's true? And the answer is no.
No.
Anybody who even hesitates to give a no answer there is probably engaged in a little bit of woo thinking or bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Anyway,
Thanks.